Okay, so moving into chromatic ideas, this is tricky at first. It's hard to hear, and often we kind of got to inch our way from coming from a blues, 1/4/5 pentatonic perspective. We got to inch our way there. We may start with some T-bone licks, walking a chromatic up from our minor third to the major third to the 4 to the flat 5 to the 5. And we'll explore that a little in this course as well. But really, there are other places than that. That's where the classic blues chromatic lines happen. But in jump, there's a lot more places borrowing from kind of jazz chromaticism that we can start to incorporate into our playing, and that's what's going to happen in this solo, in this exercise. So without further ado, let me play through it, and then we'll kind of break it down and highlight the key kind of chromatic movements. All right, so we start off very much the same with our 5, 6 root. There's our first chromatic from the 9 or the 2. We walk up to the major third. Okay, and then we resolve to the dominant 7 like we've been doing. Then we target that major third of the 4 chord. Now I've chosen this because this is a chromatic line walking over the no note for the 4 chord, which would be like a major 7, or the major third of the 1, which you always want to. I mean, no rules here, but typically you avoid that if you want to sound kind of correct at first. So, but in a chromatic context, you can work it in. It works because it's a passing tone en route to our dominant 7 right there. And then we're back. And then we have the chromatic walk down to the dominant 7 right there. Okay, so we've got this chromatic motion. We've got on the 4 chord that chromatic motion, and then on the 4th measure, resolving, tying up the 4th measure, we have all key chromatic elements. Okay, now we have a chromatic approach to the 4 chord. Okay, so we're kind of half stepping into the 4 chord, into the root of the 4 chord, the tonic. And then we just have an arpeggio. That's that F7 flat 9 sound again, right? Because we got the major third of the 4 chord, the 5, the 7, and there's that F sharp, that flat 9, okay? Again, in the 6th measure of a 12-bar blues, the 2nd measure of the 4 chord. So in the 1st measure, we have straight ahead, dominant 7 arpeggio, and then in the next measure, we have, right? There's that sound again. Okay, and then we're going to come back to our chromatic idea. So that's not necessarily chromatic, but I'm just sort of reiterating a key concept. Now we have really key chromatic line, okay, in measures 7 and 8. So measures 7 and 8 in a 12-bar blues format are really key transitional measures because they set up the 2-5-1 turnaround. And so, you know, typically measures in 7 and 8 in a 12-bar are just, you know, just spent on the 1 chord, and then in a regular 1-4-5 blues, right? But measures 7 and 8 in a, you know, reharmonized or jazz swing blues, jump swing blues, you know, the sky's the limit in terms of how you set up the 2-5-1 turnaround. And a lot of guys create all kinds of motion, you know. You've probably heard sounds like that and tunes from Stormy Monday blues to all kinds of different numbers, both blues tunes and jazz, you know, numbers as well. So we have in this piece, okay, so here's the chromatic motion. So major third, flat third, 9, flat 9, root. And the fingering on this is tricky. You know, you're tempted to want to go, and nothing's wrong with that, but this is the way I do it. So I can get back into my key zone here, first position zone. So here it is again. Okay, one more time. Okay, and then we kind of add a little pedal riff here off of that 6 that we've been resolving to in that 8th measure in all of these pieces. Then we have this turnaround, which I don't necessarily think is the most awesome 2-5-1 turnaround. It's more of an exercise to point out that if we start with outlining the key chord tones of the 2, but then we add all those chromatic notes in there, and then target the major third of the 5, we really have a line that is targeting the key notes, but also super chromatic too, you know? Up. All the way back. So let's look at that 2-5-1 one more time. Straight, you know, tonic 2, flat 3 of the 2 chord, and then on that B note for the downbeat of the 5, and then back into position. Okay, so let's just review the key concepts here. Chromatic lines or chromatic transitions. The first one we looked at was, right? Walking from the 2 to the major third. The second one we looked at was over the 4, coming down from the root to the dominant 7. And then the next one we looked at was in that 7th and 8th measure transition, and then we tied it up with this long kind of chromatic 2-5-1. So this is just meant as a primer. We're going to get into some real specific chromatic examples in the solos, in the upcoming solos in the course, but this is to kind of get it into your ear and show you the key transitional elements and key chromatic elements. In this next video, we're going to look at a very key phrasing concept, which is a pull-off backslide.